Hello, this is Margarita Monet from Edge of Paradise, and you are listening to the Metal Pit Podcast.
Welcome to the Metal Pit Podcast, where we delve deep into albums and bands that shaped metal. Please visit our website, The Metal Pit, at www.themetalpit.org, where you can find album reviews, interviews, and live show reviews. Also, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at The Metal Pit. And for some video interviews and audio versions of this podcast, please visit our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com at the Metal Pit 666. And if you are listening to us on YouTube, leave some comments about this podcast after we do it. Email us at info@themetalpit.org if you have any suggestions, or you maybe want to be a guest, or you have any complaints about us giving albums 10 out of 10 all the time or whatever, right, Jim?
That's right.
But anyway, my guests today are, as I just said, Jim and Ken, both writers, of course, for me on the Metal Pit. How are you guys today?
Yeah, we're good, man.
Okay, and today, as I said on the first line, it says where you delve deep into the albums and bands that shape metal. I guess this could be one of them, as we're going to talk about Led Zeppelin. Now, I know a lot of people are probably going to say Led Zeppelin's not heavy metal, but of course, like I say, they're one of the pioneers, I would say, along with Black Sabbath and Deep Purple. Would you agree on that, guys?
Yep,
Totally.
absolutely.
Yep.
And if I had to throw a fourth one in there, I suppose I'd throw in AC/DC, even though I know nobody's going to say they're heavy metal either, but I know they influenced a lot. And I was thinking about this today, how if we say there's those four bands, none of them sound similar at all.
No, totally not.
You would never confuse one for the other. Not like when Metallica kind of started thrash metal, and then you have all these bands that sound similar. Of course, to us, they don't sound the same, but, outsiders would think, oh, that all sounds the same. But at least with this, you're never going to have that confusion. Unless, of course, you listen to Black Sabbath's Born Again album, then you might think that sounds like Deep Purple. But
True.
we know what that's about. Okay. So I'm hoping a lot now, if there's any younger people listening, they might not even know who Led Zeppelin is. But they can go, so if they're listening to this, maybe they can go read about it. But I will just say they were formed in 1968 in London, England. I was 2 years old when they were formed. They have, I guess, 8 studio albums, plus the album Coda, which is some unused songs and outtakes that they threw on an album. And that would have been after John Bonham had passed away. And we are going to talk about their fourth album, which is, I guess, an untitled album, but I'm calling it Led Zeppelin IV for the purpose of this discussion. Sometimes it's been called Zosa, and sometimes it's been called Four Symbols, because when you open up the album, there's 4 symbols of the band's all picked an image or a thing for a symbol. So this album has sold over 37 million copies. It was released in November 1971. And as I said, it was untitled, but we're calling it number 4. Their third album, Led Zeppelin III, because the first 4 are all just Led Zeppelin, was a little more mellow compared to their second album. It was more folksy and stuff, and they got a lot of criticisms, but they sure came back different with a heavy rock one with this one again. So let's try to figure out, when did we first hear Led Zeppelin? Jim?
Jeez. I mean, I probably, I think you always heard it. I mean, like the first album I ever got, and I've told the story on many shows, was Sin After Sin. Judas Priest accidentally bought it. Thought I was getting a disco album, their Saturday Night Fever, and that was one of the records stuffed in there at a flea market. So that kind of got me into it. But I mean, like I probably heard like Sabbath probably quicker, because growing up in the 80s, I would have been 9 years old in 1980. So like in the early 80s, probably Sabbath was more. I remember I had a Black Sabbath shirt when I was in, like, I think grade 7. So that was pretty impressive. I probably couldn't name very many of their songs or none of their albums, but hey, I was representing. And Deep Purple, I kind of fell in love with on, pretty much their reunion album, I guess you could say. And then kind of went backwards there. But I think Led Zeppelin was always, probably classic rock stations. I probably have heard it, and I gotta be honest with you. On this album as well as their whole catalog, they're a mainstay, and everybody says, "Wow, they're not heavy metal." No, but I agree, they're definitely one of the the grandfathers of heavy metal. And I definitely put them up there with AC/DC, like you said, with Black Sabbath and Deep Purple, and yeah, all four of those bands have total different sounds. So it just kind of is a testament to how, you've got Sabbath, who kind of brought a doom sound. You've got Zeppelin, who's a lot more bluesy, and you got AC/DC's kind of a really cool rocker sound, and Deep Purple just delves into a whole bunch of stuff. And it definitely shows the scope of in the late 60s all through the 70s, and then some of these bands are even still going today, and just shows the scope of what they brought and how the genres branched out from there. And I think the family tree would have started with these acorns, so to say.
And Jim, how about you? Oh, sorry, you were Jim. Ken, how about you?
Well, okay, so I'm going to approach this from a different angle. Now, we're just talking earlier about how old we were when this album came out. Now, I was just like 2 years old. So, and I mentioned this before on previous podcasts. My dad used to make speaker cabinets. He used to work for Yorkville Sound. So he knew a lot of like Canadian bands like Lighthouse, Kilowhack, April Wine. He knew all these guys. And because he knew all these guys, he'd always bring these albums home. So my dad had a lot of vinyl. Zeppelin was one of the bands that he brought home to play. And I was 2. Now, I don't know this story, but my mom told me this story that when I was 2, I would sit there and like bang my hands on the ground as if I was drumming to Led Zeppelin. And this album in particular, when it came out. So it's kind of funny that I don't have any recollection of this, and I probably wouldn't have even started listening to Zeppelin until I was a teenager, because the vinyl records were all around my house. So I was probably about 15, 16 when I really started looking into Zeppelin. But I think Sabbath would have been, I think for me, it would have been either Sabbath or Purple first that I would have really been into. And then I got into Zeppelin. But as Jim, as you mentioned, radio play was a huge for Zeppelin. Like, they were always on the radio. Q107 in Toronto constantly played them. So you heard them. Even if I wasn't like actively listening to the band, I knew of them. Like anyone growing up and like in the late 70s or even early 80s, yeah, you knew who Zeppelin were for sure. So yeah, so I guess by the time the early 80s came, I started really getting into Zeppelin because I was already into Sabbath, I was already into Purple. So that's kind of where I approach it from.
Okay, well, for me, again, it's hard to remember exactly. And sure, they would have been on the radio. Maybe Immigrant Song might have been on the radio. And then, of course, Stairway to Heaven.
Yeah.
I remember as a teenager when I was just getting into music, but I would listen to, AM radio, because back then there wasn't heavy metal. There was some hard rock on the radio, but it was on your AM top 40 radio stations. And living in Canada, you would hear a lot of Canadian stuff like April Wine and Street Heart and whatever, those bands. And of course, you'd hear Stairway to Heaven. And they'd always have New Year's Eve, they would always have the top 100 songs of all time or something. And Stairway to Heaven was always 1 or 2, like with the Beatles and Hey Jude, I think it was the song. So I would hear that, but I never liked it because I'm not a ballad kind of guy. And so I would hear that song. I liked the last minute of the song, but I always hated, or I didn't hate, but I never really liked Stairway to Heaven at that time. So I don't think I listened to the album yet. So I like the whole album yet. And I can't even remember exactly when I really finally started getting into it. But now I really like the album, which we will find out. But I can say Stairway to Heaven is probably my least favorite song on it, even though it's probably their most popular song ever. But Anyway, but I think that could have been Stairway to Heaven could have been the first song I ever heard, and I didn't like it. But now Led Zeppelin is one of my favorite bands of all time. So it's just funny how that works out. Okay, so with this album, like we said, it's called Led Zeppelin. Well, it's not called anything, but we're calling it Led Zeppelin IV. And even on the cover of the album, it depicts an old man carrying a bundle of sticks on his back. And I guess it was a photo that was bought at an antique shop. So they threw it on the album, and there's no words on the album. It doesn't even say Led Zeppelin on it, and it doesn't say nothing. And they said after the lukewarm reception to Led Zeppelin III that Jimmy Page decided that the next Zeppelin album would not have a title, and the record company was strongly against that. But the group stood their ground and said they didn't want any markings on the title at all. And somebody told them that you're going to commit music suicide by doing this. But of course, that guy was wrong. But I love that they didn't give in to the record company. You have any thoughts on the album cover or the no name or anything like that, Ken?
Yeah, I know. I didn't actually look it up, but I like that cover. That cover is really interesting. It for some reason it just has this kind of painterly feel to it. It's a photograph, but I always thought it was a very unique cover for them, for what I like of it. But it's not Houses of the Holy, but it's certainly an interesting album cover.
And Jim?
Yeah, it's kind of cool. Like you say, they stood up to the record company. I mean, when you think about it, it's a pile of sticks, and a lot of black metal logos and names, band names, look like a pile of sticks that spell out their name. So, no, I'm just kidding. But no, it's kind of cool. I think that's pretty neat, and I like the symbols, and obviously some of the songs on here that are they kind of go a little bit deeper into maybe some of the stuff they like. With Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. It's pretty cool. I thought the symbols in that were pretty neat, and I remember like older brothers of my friends and that all were wearing Zeppelin shirts and that, and they would have the symbols on there. And not till years later that I figured it out that each one signified a band member. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I guess it just goes to prove that the product, the music speaks for itself. Because I mean, how many? What was it? 37 million worldwide. This went 2 million copies in Canada, and I mean, that's pretty impressive, and that's pretty neat. And so I think it's pretty cool, and I give them props for it. And I love it when the album art is somewhat interesting, has a bit of a story to it, rather than just like putting four guys on a cover with poofy hair and and then they're just kind of pouting. It's great. I think it's awesome.
There's probably not too many bands in existence that had an album out and then didn't even have their name on it. Pink Floyd might have did that too, if I'm not mistaken. There's one with a cow on it. I don't remember seeing their name on that. Maybe I'm wrong, but because I watched a documentary on a person that used to make album covers, and he made that cow one for Pink Floyd, and he made the Pigs on the Wing album cover for Pink Floyd too. And I think he did some Led Zeppelin one, not this one, because this is just, like we said, a picture that Robert Plant bought at an antique store. But yeah, I thought it was very interesting that,
well, it's probably a parody like the Spinal Tap Black album, because they probably used that. They didn't have their name on it, but it's blacker than black. You can't get any blacker.
That's right. The classic Spinal Tap also didn't have their name on their albums. But yeah, that's true. Because I know reading when we did a podcast on Black Sabbath, and when they did the Born Again album, Tony Iommi didn't want to call it Black Sabbath, but the record company says we have to, and he gave in.
Yeah.
And he says, okay, but whatever. They could have called it Deep Purple too.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so we want to get on to the songs. Oh, wait, I guess I'll mention the band members. And usually when we'll mention the band members of an album, there'll be other albums where they're different. But Led Zeppelin, every album, it's the same band members. And then we got vocals, Robert Plant, guitarist Jimmy Page, bass, John Paul Jones, and drummer John Bonham. And of course, John Bonham passed away from alcohol asphyxiation, I think is what I'm saying here. And that when that happened, that was in 1980, September 1980, and that was the end of Zeppelin, as they didn't want to replace them with a different drummer. They said if we're not all here, then we're not here. Except for a few, I guess I did a few live shows like with John
Yeah.
Bonham's son as a drummer
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But and I'm sure we would have loved it if they went on tour with them, like did a full tour with them, and they would have made lots of money. So I guess kudos to them for not caring about that and caring about John Bonham and his legacy.
Totally.
Mhm.
So we'll get to the album, and we start off with a song named about my dog, I guess, because I have a black dog. So this song is called Black Dog. And Jim, how'd you like to go first?
I mean, what can you say about this? Yeah, when I was doing my sort of my background on all the songs, I was like, this is Blake's song for sure. But I mean, this is an iconic song. I mean, it's one of my favorite. I mean, it's probably not my favorite. I like kind of one other ones on this better, but I mean, it's a great song. It's amazing. It's iconic. I mean, Plant's voice just rips right through. I mean, it's all about the black Labrador Retriever that I believe is hanging around or spotted around the recording studio, and I mean, it's just iconic. Everything about it is iconic. I mean, you hear it, you know exactly what it is. And there's a couple of songs on this album that is like that, and I mean, this is just it's such a cool song. It's probably one of my top 10 for sure Zeppelin songs of all time. Awesome song.
And Kent?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really, really good song. It starts out really good. I love the muted guitars at the beginning of it, and then the song just kind of rips and it goes into a lot of really like nice distortion with Page's Gibson Les Paul. Yeah, it's a strong song for me. It's one I used to hear on the radio all the time, and as Jim said, of course, like they're all obsessed with this black lab that was always coming out at night during at the studio. And then, when you look at some of the lyrics and what was said about it, about the idea that the song's about lust, it's about eroticism and betrayal. So it's interesting. You look at that dog, and then you got Plant saying that, well, that dog is going to see his Mrs. Dog at night for a little visit, and then I mean, it's funny how he would view it that way. But yeah, it's a great song. Yeah, I love this song. The main riff is great, and I know that John Paul Jones, who wrote the main riff, was inspired by Muddy Waters' Electric Mud, which is some music that I kind of like. So I can see where they pulled some of their inspiration from. But as an opening song, yeah, it's a really good song. It's one of my favorite songs from the band as well.
Yes, and I love the song too. And my last dog was also black, so I don't.
You're definitely a fan.
I guess I should have called my dog Black Dog instead of giving him a name. I should have just called him Black Dog. But anyway, I don't. Yeah, I don't have to mention anything about the dog since guys did your research too. And yes, it was at the Headley Grange Studios, where the studio grounds of that. I guess it was a house or whatever.
Yeah.
That they recorded it in, but yeah, they would see that dog and then they figured it went away to have sex and then it would come back again later or something. I don't think Led Zeppelin had too many songs about sex, but anyway, this is one of them, I guess.
Yeah, so they say.
Then we go to the song Rock and Roll. Ken, what do you think of Rock and Roll?
Oh, like this is a toe tapper for me. It's perfect. It's a perfect song just to follow up from Black Dog. Plant's vocals here are the best. They oohs and ahs. I love this song. It's a ripper of a song. Yeah, it never lets up. It's lots of energy, lots of bluesy riffs. It's a great song for me.
And Jim?
Yeah, I mean, this is another talk about a 1-2 punch on an album. I mean, you don't have to name the album anything with songs like this on there. I mean, it's exactly what it is. It's rock and roll. And I mean, reading about it, I read that it was kind of a spontaneous writing session where it was more of a jam session. Then they inserted stuff. So they used for their kind of a little bit of like Little Richard's Keep a Knockin' at the beginning of it. And I think Jimmy Page kind of went with more of a, like kind of has that old school Chuck Berry kind of guitar riffing that's going on in it. I mean, it's pretty cool. It's I think they wrote. I was reading that they wrote most of this. I mean, this is such an amazing song. And this kind of reminds me of like two totally different songs, but kind of reminds me of the way Smoke on the Water went with Deep Purple, because this was written, most of it was written in about 15 minutes. And I know that song was written fairly quickly too. And then you've got these two songs that were kind of like sleeping giants. So very, very similar in the way they kind of were constructed. And it just goes to show that, when you got something, and it doesn't have to be something like I don't know, Axl Rose putting out Chinese Democracy over 20 years. You do something like this so quick, and it's just a massive hit. And I mean, it's exactly what it is, rock and roll. I mean, what an amazing, amazing song. Love it.
And I will mention that Rolling Stones original piano player, I guess, Ian Stewart, and also co-founded Rolling Stones, he had a guest spot on the song too, even though I probably just found that out today. And yeah, I love Robert. I mean, I think they're all great musicians, and Robert Plant's singer, and he's always doing his ahs and whatevers, and he's a great screamer, and it's probably the first, because Ozzy, Ian Gillan was probably the first real heavy metal screamer.
Yeah.
But because Ozzy didn't really have that kind of singing thing, and Robert Plant has a special kind of voice for himself too. Then we go to the Battle of Evermore. And Jim, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I thought when I listened to this, and I mean, I probably haven't listened to this song as much as I knew the hits on the album, more so, but like, it's a cool song, and I thought of Ken. Soon as and then when I read the bio on the song, I was like, totally, this is, it's kind of follows the Lord of the Rings, and it's really, really folky. It's probably not necessarily my thing, but I mean, the mandolin in it's pretty cool. That I believe John Paul Jones played the mandolin on it. It's definitely neat, and I think it's a third track. It's pretty cool. It's really interesting, and I mean, I can imagine Ken probably can tell the story of the Battle of Evermore for sure.
Ken?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, basically, I know we talked about this on the Blind Guardian podcast, but again, they went back to the Silmarillion for their inspiration. So the lyrics tend to go back to the idea that the Dark Lord and of the ring race in the battle between Pelennor Fields. So they're alluding to that in most of the song. And yeah, it is a very folky song, first of all. So obviously why they decided to ask Sandy Denny, because she was a former British folk singer, to come in and sing. And from my understanding, she's the only other person that sang on a song with Robert for that only time. So it kind of works. Maybe it's a little lofty for some of the ideals, but I kind of like it as well. It doesn't have the same energy as the first two songs, but it's all right. I don't mind the song at all.
I like the song, and I was probably going to mention this when we do Going to California, but as I've said many times before, I'm not really a fan of, not that this is a ballad, but of slower songs and stuff. But Robert Plant's voice is so great, and like you said, the mandolin is cool to start. And
yeah,
whenever Jimmy Page plays an acoustic guitar, it still sounds heavy.
Yeah.
Even though it's acoustic guitar. And I love the line where, even though it has nothing to do with John Bonham, but I still love the line in it, the drums will shake the castle wall, because that just makes me think of John Bonham.
Yeah.
Even though I realize that's not what it's about. Then we go to some song that a few people have heard before. Stairway to Heaven, 8 minutes. This might be one of the first long song I heard. I'm not sure. But anyway, Ken, do you love Stairway to Heaven?
Actually, I do like the song. I mean, I think when I first heard it, I probably wouldn't have thought it was that great, but because it was always on the radio, and even when I was like in grade 8, we had like a school dance. The song was played at my school dance. So it's like, who doesn't grow up with Led Zeppelin? It's a classic song. And I love the fact that it's one of those songs where it's broken up into the three sections, where you get the acoustic to start, then you get the guitars to come in, and then you get the up-tempo hard rock portion at the end, which I think you said, Blake, you preferred with the song.
Yeah.
Yeah, Yeah, it's one of those songs that, yeah, it is a classic because it's been heard for so much. I know Q107 here in Toronto, they played it all the time, so I
Oh, yeah.
constantly heard this song growing up. So for me, it's just a natural song to hear from the band. And I also did a little bit of reading up on it because I was curious about the actual writing parts of it. So from what they say, they actually recorded bits of it on tape, bits and pieces of it, and according to what I had read, the lyrics were actually written spontaneously, so they didn't really spend a lot of time thinking about it. So they just got together, wrote the song, and it's a bona fide classic for me.
And Jim,
Yeah, look, it's overplayed. We know that. I mean, at every like I gotta admit, at every junior high dance, 100%. This was the last song of the night, so you knew like it was last chance for romance. If you're a single dude, you're trying to get that before the gymnasium lights came on and your mom came to come pick you up. But anyways, I digress. God, I'm having flashbacks. Anyways, no, it's a cool song. It was overplayed. It's been massively overplayed. And I think that's probably why, I mean, every band has it. A lot of people would probably say the same thing about Smoke on the Water. I keep using that as an example. I love that song, but it is been played a lot. But I mean, the interesting tidbit that I like about it, and I like it even more now, is the possible backmasking that happened where it's really satanic. So, I mean, that really, and me being the youngest out of the three of us here, I'm really impressionable. So I have to say that listening to these satanic references backwards, because on they have that online where you can actually listen to it. I mean, it sounds legit to me. He'll give you 666. There was a little tool shed where he made us suffer, sad Satan, and it goes on with this whole satanic references. I mean, it's kind of cool because you can hear. I've heard the Aussie ones before, and I don't know. It seemed kind of a little muddled to me, but then again, so was Ozzy singing. So, but this is pretty cool. It's pretty clear. It sounds like I want to hear it. So maybe it's just my ears kicking it out and saying it. But I thought that was pretty cool. But I mean, as a classic, I got to give this. It's a 10 out of 10 song. I mean, I got to give it cred. It's it's sold so well. It's so popular. Probably one of the most played hard rock songs in history, and you got to give it cred. But yeah, definitely for me, overplayed, but it definitely is a classic.
yeah, I was reading about this backmasking thing too, but the band, of course, claims that it's BS and that
I
they
don't know.
didn't. Why would they
I
wait?
heard it, Blake. Blake, I heard it, and
Well, yeah,
I'm staying out of my tool shed for at least a couple of weeks.
well, I listened to it too, but I didn't. I thought they were saying Santa, not Satan.
It does sound like that.
But that Page was really into the occult. Now he may deny it, but I mean the guy bought Aleister Crowley's house. What does that tell you?
Yeah.
So I mean, like the Batman, I mean, you're right. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. They can deny it, but I won't be surprised if it was kind of there.
But if they, what would be the reason to do it though? Really, unless it's for good luck. They think Satan's going to help them sell 37 million copies, maybe if they put his name on it backwards, maybe.
Well, Page was heavily into the occult, so.
But I know Page also thought that where they recorded this was haunted, also too. Where they recorded this album, he thought it was haunted. I didn't see much about that here. I just heard that on a documentary. I don't see anything online about that, but anyway, yeah, I listened to it and thought, yeah, okay, whatever. But it doesn't really matter. But there was an assembly person in California that proposed a law to put warning labels on albums that have backmasking on them.
Yeah.
But hopefully that never went through.
No.
But that would make me want to buy an album. I think that's cool. Yeah. That's like a bonus track in my mind. I'm like, I want somebody to direct me for Satan, and I want to follow. I need to follow. Anyways. Okay,
but then you're gonna wreck your needle on your turntable.
Yeah, true.
Maybe that's why they did it, so people have to go buy a new turntable. I don't know. Maybe they're in cahoots. But anyway, you guys mentioned it at school dances. I didn't go to any school dances because whatever. But since I'm a little older than you, I did go to weddings. So I started having relatives that were getting married, and then they would play this at the wedding. I'm going, they're going to
Oh,
play an
wow.
8-minute song, Led Zeppelin song at a wedding.
Yeah.
And I didn't like to dance. And I thought, well, I guess we could dance until it gets fast and we're getting off here because I'm not letting anybody, I don't know what I'm going to do when it picks up speed. But yes, it's definitely overplayed. And that's probably one of the reasons I didn't like it too, is yes, it was overplayed, even though I don't have a problem hearing Smoke on the Water since you mentioned it a few times.
Yeah.
But I can appreciate it a lot more now. The ballady part of it or whatever. I appreciate that and learned to, of course, love Led Zeppelin after that. So yeah, I don't have any problem with it. So
I think I like, and I probably can. I kind of get the same feeling. I think probably is, I probably appreciate it more now than I did
Yeah.
at the school dances. Like it was kind of
Exactly.
like,
Yeah.
why are they playing this? Like now I'm like, it comes on the radio. I'm like, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
yes.
It grows on you.
And it reminds me of the Black Sabbath song "Heaven and Hell," even though it's not slow throughout, but just the ending is how Heaven and Hell they pick up, and it's like not that they're trying to, because I know that was with Dio, of course, then, but I do remember on one of the documentaries I watched that Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin were friends and stuff, but I was trying to look up stuff about the similarities of the bands, not their music, of course, because it's totally different, but just because they were out at the same time. I think Led Zeppelin was a little earlier than Sabbath, like a year or something like that. But anyway, then we turn our turntable over and hope we didn't wreck our needle by playing our last song. And we go to Misty Mountain Hop. And just as I had a cat once, I named it Misty after the song.
Nice.
But
Very cool, buddy.
anyway, so I should have named my dog after Black Dog. But anyway, Jim, what do you think of Misty Mountain Hop? Is it
Well,
hop?
kind of I didn't name a cat, but I remember when I used to, frequent um, dancing bars. There was a young lady who her name was Misty performing. Anyways, but no, it's a pretty cool song. This is a good song. I mean, yeah, I keep forgetting. Like I was reading the listing of the songs, and I was like, hey, why is this starting at one? Like because they do it when they do it to flip the album over. So it's pretty neat. But this is another one that is about the Hobbit. So it's apparently involves the reference of the Misty Mountains, but it's pretty cool. I like it. It's got a kind of a, I think it was a B-side single for actual Black Dog, so probably picked up a lot of play and a lot of love there because I mean, obviously, the B-side of a single like from that would really people would definitely get familiar with it quite a bit. But I find it pretty heavy too. It's a pretty heavy song. I like it. I like it quite a bit.
And Ken?
Yeah, there is that one reference to the Hobbit, obviously in the lyrics. Although I was reading something that I thought was quite interesting, though. It was mentioned that at the time there was a huge bust. The police were busting people in Hyde Park for marijuana use, and apparently Robert was really really pissed about that because he's all about the idea of living in a free society. So some suggest that some of the lyrics and some of the ideas for the song are fueled from that incident. I don't know if that's true, but I just thought that was kind of fascinating. And then I also saw that Plant. This is one song that Plant apparently really associates himself with. So it's one of those songs that he feels really really strongly about. But like what Jim was just saying, yeah, it's a really heavy song, and it picks up the pace. It's really good. I like the song a lot as well.
I think this might be my favorite song on the album, actually, this one.
Cool.
Oh, all right.
And yes, I also did read that, even I read both things that you said, the Hobbit thing and then the drug thing, and how, yeah, Plant's quest for a better society. I guess smoking pot makes it a better society, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess that's what that means. Or maybe it just means where you have the freedom to do whatever you want, I guess. But Whatever. Okay, now the next song, this they could have named the album this title, Four Sticks, except the guy's carrying too many sticks on the cover. But anyway, this song's called Four Sticks. Ken, what do you think of Four Sticks?
Oh, I like the song quite a bit. Yeah, I know it refers to Bonham's performance with like the using the two sets of drumsticks, so it's kind of a little, kind of a pun or a little play on the four sticks thing. Um, I like the song, and I know I've read a lot in guitar magazines about how when Page recorded the riffs and the music, there was a lot of unusual time signatures because he kind of recorded it in a 5/8 and a 6/8 ratio, so they mixed it that way. So I've read that this song was really, really hard for them to play live, so they didn't really do a lot of playing with it. But as a song, I love this song. I love Plant's oohs and ahs on this. It's pretty bluesy. It's pretty heavy. It's another song that I really like on the album as well.
And Jim?
Yeah, I mean, this is a cool song. Definitely shows off Bonham's drumming ability. I find it's really cool. It's got a synthy sound to it too. And I mean, yeah, that would have been a kind of a cool name for the album with a bundle of sticks. Just call it Four Sticks. I think that would have been pretty cool. But no, I like it. It's definitely got a darker sound to it. And yeah, like when I was looking, from what I saw, and I didn't look up on the that live playing website, but it actually said that it only has been identified as being played once, and that was in Copenhagen. So definitely, to Ken's point, probably something a little bit more harder to play live and maybe to pull it off. So best to probably just leave it as a studio track for sure. But it definitely a cool song, pretty technical. I mean, this is the probably more of the thinking man songs towards the mid part of the album on the second side here. That's really cool. I think it's a pretty cool track.
Yeah, I think Bonham's drumming is kind of the driving force of this song, at least at the start, anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
And I did notice that Robert Plant says baby 18 times in this song. And babe twice. So I'm not sure why.
Yeah.
He says he baby a few times in his singing. I wonder if he's with a girl, does he call her baby, or she's like, quit singing? I don't know. Anyway. Then we go to I guess this is this is a ballad. I was mentioning this before, and I say I don't like ballads, but I like Robert Plant singing ballads, I guess. Going to California. Jim, do you like Going to California?
Yeah, it's not one of my favorites on there, and I think in not that Rolling Stone magazine does anything great, but I think they had this at number 11 on their top Zeppelin songs, which was kind of interesting, but it's kind of a bit too folky for me. I'm not a folky guy. I'm not really, into that. But it's a cool song. I mean, again, it's got the mandolin again on it, which is kind of neat. And I believe from what I read that it was kind of inspired by Joni Mitchell. So, but definitely a cool song. Just probably not one of my favorites on the album. But I can understand where it gets a lot of love from everybody, and I mean it's pretty cool. I like it.
And Ken?
Yeah, so for me as well, I don't think it's a bad song. Yeah, it's strictly a folk song, so it's got that acoustic guitar going all the way through it. I did read that apparently one of the impetus for the song was that about going to California and experiencing earthquakes. So I don't know how that translates into the song, but that's what I've heard. And then also to Jim's point about the Joni Mitchell, Plant did say later on that he did sort of borrow some of her songs from her first album, and he's even admitted that he was actually kind of embarrassed later on in life because he was just a kid when he wrote the song, and he was actually embarrassed to say that he did sort of, I guess, look at Joni Mitchell's debut album and kind of borrow from it to come up with this song. But the song's all right. It's not one of my favorites, but I could live with it.
And well, I already said, I guess I like the song. And yeah, there was some reference to Earth. I guess once they were going to call the song Guide to California. And right. I guess that's so that if you go there's going to be earthquakes. I don't know. I don't know how often there's earthquakes. But if anybody told me that I would like a song that has the lyric of someone told me there's a girl out there with love in her eyes and flowers in her hair, I'd say you're crazy, but I don't mind it.
Yeah.
Especially live. I love it when you listen to some of their live albums, the song comes off way better on there too than it does on the studio album. Then that's it. One more song, right? Yeah. Last
Yeah.
song. When the Levee Breaks, Jim.
Ah, masterpiece. This is my favorite song on the album. Love this song. Absolutely love this song. I mean, I guess it was originally, it was originally, I guess, recorded it's by Kansas Joe McCoy and Memphis Minnie. So I'd like to hear that original one. But I mean, this thing just goes on and it's so cool. I mean, it's so bluesy and it really shows off. I think you've got Jimmy Page just ripping through it, and I mean the drums on this again. Bonham just shines on this one, and I think this was originally I think it was originally written about a flood in Mississippi in the late 20s. So it's kind of one of those songs that are probably somewhat originated, definitely as maybe probably was a old folk song from back then that they really put their twist on it. But this was an interesting point too. This was one of the ones that they used that Rolling Stones mobile studio, which they used for the Deep Purple, for a lot of the Deep Purple album when they burned down the recording area for the God, for what album was it there?
Machine Head
Machine Head,
album.
yeah. So that's kind of neat. The Rolling Stones, and their equipment were everywhere. So, but no, it's pretty cool. My favorite song on the album, one of my top songs from Led Zeppelin, probably one of my top songs, like out of all songs. I love this song. It's just so good, so good.
Ken?
Yeah, this is a great song as well. Again, we should point out that Bonham's drumming is fantastic in this song. It sort of takes center stage here. The harmonica is great in it. It really adds to the song. It's pretty bluesy. It's got that rock blues thing going for it. Yeah, it's a great song. I also did read that they do say that this song is another one of their songs that they don't play live, or they played a few times and had some difficulty playing it. I don't know why they would say that, but that's what I was reading. So I thought that was kind of interesting too.
Yeah, I don't. According to that Wikipedia site, it doesn't even list it at all that they played it, but I'm not sure if that's right or not. And it says 4 sticks. They played twice, even though Wikipedia says once, like we said. But they especially played, of course, Stairway to Heaven, Black Dog, Rock and Roll a lot, and Going to California a lot, and Misty Mountain Hop and the Battle of Evermore a fair amount. But I didn't really deal with that much for Led Zeppelin, since they had even though they did have 8 albums, they still had a short career, even though they did tour massively before all that happened. But anyway, so that's I guess. And I like the song too. I don't need to add anything. You guys all covered that one. So that's the album. I'm afraid to ask what you're going to give it out of 10, Jim. But what are you going to give it out of 10?
I mean, there's a couple of it's not my favorite Led Zeppelin album, but I gotta give this a 10. I mean, it's a masterpiece, and what it means to the whole hard rock / metal movement is anything that sells 37 million copies. I mean, okay, as a hard rock / metal act, I'm not talking their Taylor Swift, but I'm talking about these genres. You gotta give it cred. So I mean, it's a 10 out of 10. It has to be. I mean, come on. I mean, it's not my favorite one, but only by points of points. I mean, most of their albums would be like there's probably 2 or 3 there that are definitely 10 out of 10s and are just absolutely so important to the whole movement for heavy metal and for hard rock. Absolutely.
And Ken, what would you give it?
No, I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10 as well. For me, it's just the radio play. It was constantly on the radio.
Yeah.
I heard it all the time. My dad had the vinyl, so even as a kid, I identified with it. So yeah, for me, it has to be a 10. I couldn't see it any other way because every song on that album is fairly well known, and you've heard it. They played it, so yeah, and I think it is fairly influential for a lot of bands in the future who are going into like heavy metal and hard rock, and so yeah, it's a 10 out of 10 for me as well.
Well, I'll give it a 9.999. No, I'll give it a 10 too. Because it's like Jim. We'll see if we have the same number one Zeppelin album because we're going to rank the Zeppelin albums here in a few minutes. But yeah, it's a 10 out of 10, but it's not my favorite either. But we'll get to that here in a few minutes. And as we said, yes, it sold 37 million copies, 2 million in Canada. I wasn't sure if you got that part. It sold just under 2 in the United Kingdom, and it sold a mere 24 million in the United States.
Jeez.
And
Rock stars.
It peaked at number one in Canada, and it's funny, it didn't peak at number one in the United States, though, even though it must have sold a lot after, but it peaked at number one in Canada and the United Kingdom, and it peaked at number two in USA, Australia, Japan, and Italy. And none of us have seen Led Zeppelin live, but I'm sure we've listened to some live Led Zeppelin albums. What do you think of that? Jim?
Yeah,
you wish
no,
you would
it's
have
good.
seen Led Zeppelin live.
No, I haven't seen Led Zeppelin live. This album came out the year I was born. So, but what's neat is, yeah, I've seen lots of performances, and I think it's really cool just to note the fact that when Bonham passed away, they called it quits because, there's so many bands out there that just go past their expiration date, and nowadays, even more so than probably back then. Back then, I don't necessarily think it was necessarily a money grab as such. I mean, yes, they sold albums. We don't sell albums nowadays, and they were able to make they were rock stars. But now I find bands are just they're trying to get these tours going, and they're trying to keep kind of the dream alive. Not necessarily in a lot of cases for the fans, just to kind of sell on their names, and that's what happens. You've got bands out there that are touring and aren't putting any new material out, which I totally respect and I get that, but it just kind of cheapens it for me. And I think the fact that they called it quits, you got to respect that. I like to be a pure. I'd like to think I'm a purist, but I know that, if I had a chance to see, would have had a chance to see them tour with his son, I probably would have jumped on that absolutely and wanted to see that. I mean, I'm just as curious as the next person, and I think they would have been able to pull it off. But I got to give respect for that, and I think it's pretty cool. But yeah, any clips or any of the live and the concerts I've seen online or the albums, it's superb. They're phenomenal, and I mean, the other reason why I gave it a 10 is you think of how many drummers spawned from Bonham, how many guitar players, spawned from Jimmy Page. And you think of how many singers, want to have that, not only the vocal ability, but the stage presence of Plant. I mean, so many bands that just kind of went on from this. One I can think of that I liked back in the late 70s, early 80s would be like Whitesnake. I mean, very similar, trying to hit that, nowhere's near, but still very talented, and definitely, these were the vibes they were taking from it. I just think it just they're that important. So it's pretty cool.
And Ken, you want to add anything about live albums or anything?
Yeah, I'll share this quick story. When I was starting college, I worked in the summer times at a pool company. So I was in the back helping filling up containers for chlorine. And there was a guy that worked there, and he was a funny dude. He's from the 60s. So he's seen everything. He's all these great bands from way back in the 60s. He's seen Zeppelin a bunch of times, and he told me, and I was stunned when I heard this. He's like, they sucked live. And I said, what? Zeppelin? How can that actually be? It's like I hear this band on the radio all the time, and everyone talks about Zeppelin, but to this day he was like, no, I seen them live and they sucked live. And I was like, well, okay, well, I never believed it, but when I looked him up online, I was like, no, this sounds great. Like I could never connect the fact that he was saying that they sucked live, because I don't see it. But I guess that's opinions, right? Everyone has an opinion.
Yes. Maybe he didn't like the fact that they would take a song like Dazed and Confused from their first album that's
Right.
6 minutes long and then play it live and it takes 25 minutes to play it.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. It could have been.
Because
It was it was odd.
I was gonna say that Led Zeppelin, even though they sure influenced a lot of people just music, but they probably influenced a lot of people with the way they did their live shows and doing those
Yeah.
long jam. I'm sure Deep Dream Theater learned a lot from seeing Led
Yeah.
Zeppelin and
Oh,
doing these
absolutely.
turning these 5 minute songs into 20-minute jam sessions live and just having fun and stuff like that. So I know How the West was one. It was one of their live albums, which I like a lot. And I had a couple of their DVDs. I don't think it was released on an album. There was one in New York, and yes, I couldn't imagine anybody thinking that they sucked live either. I don't really understand
Yeah,
that
I
either.
wouldn't. But I would love to see him live. I mean, I'm like Jim. If Jason had
Mm.
joined him and they continued, I would have went to that easily. No,
Oh,
Oh
yeah.
I
yeah.
wouldn't turn that down at all.
Just imagine how much money they could have made.
Oh yeah.
Because when they were playing live, it was probably $5 or $10 a ticket.
Yeah.
And
Well,
now, I mean, maybe not now at their age now, but even 10 years ago or whatever, it still would. I mean, even if they did it now, there would still be thousands of people ready to get tickets or
Oh
whatever.
yeah.
well, I thought at one point in the 80s there was discussion of like the band getting back together to play with Jason, but it never materialized. But there was always these rumors going on. Well, will they get back together, play with Jason? Never happened, but maybe that was for the better.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's good on them that it isn't just all about the money, I guess, even
Yeah.
though I'm sure they made
Yeah.
lots of money. Hopefully they still have it. And I know they all did other musical projects, which maybe we'll talk about that a little later here. Ken might bring that up anyway, for sure. But I do want to before we get to our our ranking our Zepp albums, there's a thing I always seen in a documentary, and I always thought it was so cool. But because they used to wreck hotel rooms, because that's what rock stars did in the 70s, I guess, more so than now. Maybe they still do it, but you don't hear about anything like that now. But I remember watching a documentary, and they were at a hotel, and they're checking out, and the guy says that, oh, I got to charge you this much for all the damage you caused and stuff. And they said, okay, no problem. And then he said, I envy you guys so much. And you go, why do you envy us so much? He goes, because you get to trash hotel rooms. And they said, well, here's some money. Go trash one of your rooms. And then they let the guy go and trash one of the hotel rooms. I don't, he might have got fired though, since he did work at the hotel.
God.
But they offered to give him the money to pay for all the damage he wanted to go cause and be like Led Zeppelin.
That's cool.
But if bands are listening, young bands, don't trash your hotel room
No.
because you
Well,
probably can't afford it.
Save your money.
Well, now they nail everything down like in a Comfort Inn. Everything's
Yeah.
everything's nailed down.
Can't even steal a towel anymore. It's like $40 to steal a towel. They'll say, well, if you steal this, we're sending you a bill for $40 for a hand towel. Okay, now, so we're going to rank the Zeppelin albums bottom to top or whatever. And there's 8, like I mentioned before, there's 8 studio albums, and there's also Coda. I included Coda in my list. You two didn't have to. I think I'll go first this time. I usually go last, so I'll just go first. Okay, so for number 9, so I have 9 then. So number 9, I got Houses of the Holy. And it's just that because a few of their albums are a little more mellower and stuff, even though I kind of contradict myself higher in my list. But anyway, there's still some good songs on it. Just it's not one of my favorite, obviously, Led Zeppelin albums. Number 8, I got Presence, and same thing as Houses of the Holy. It's not that there's some good heavy songs on it, but it's not there's a lot of, the kind of turning progressive a little, because those are actually, well, Presence is their last studio album, isn't it? Or no, I'm not sure. No, maybe there was one more after that. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Number 7, I got their first album with, Communication Breakdown on it, Dazed and Confused, Good Times, Bad Times. It was a good debut album. Number 6, I have In Through the Outdoor. Number 5, I have Coda, even though it's only like 30 minutes long, 35 minutes long. But I love Bonzo's Mantra, which is the drum solo by John Bonham. I think that's so awesome in it. And Poor Tom and Ozone Baby. There's Baby back again. And so I love that album actually. And number 4, I got Led Zeppelin II, which was one of their heavier rocking ones with Whole Lot of Love on it, Heartbreaker, Living Loving Maid. Number 3, I have number 3, Led Zeppelin III. And like we mentioned before, but it's a little bit less. There's more folksy on it, but it has like 3 of my favorite Led Zeppelin songs are on it, with the Immigrant Song, which isn't folksy. But then there's Brawn Your Stomp and That's the Way. Those are 2 of my other favorite Led Zeppelin songs of all time, even though they're folksy kind of ballads, but I just love them. And number 2, I have Led Zeppelin IV, which of course we just talked about. And my number 1 is Physical Graffiti, which I had this on my top 50. I can't remember what number I had it at, but there's just so many good songs on that one. In My Time of Dying, Kashmir, Trampled Underfoot, Houses of the Holy. The list just goes on. There's hardly any bad songs on that. And it's like a long album. It's a double album.
Double album, yeah. It's classic.
So, so that's my favorite album. And we'll let Jim go next then.
Well, very similar, and that's kind of funny. I was counting it down with you, but number 8 for me would be In Through the Outdoor, and I got to admit, a couple of these albums I'm probably not as familiar with, so that's probably why I ranked them a little farther down. Number 7 would be Presence. Number 6 would be the Zeppelin debut. I love that album. That's a wicked album. 5 would be Zeppelin 2. 4, Zeppelin 3. 3 would be Houses of the Holy. Finish it off the exact same as Blake with number 4, Led Zeppelin 4, number 2, and Physical Graffiti as number 1. That is a phenomenal album, and I think I had that on my list when we did the Deep Purple podcast as one of my top albums from the 70s. And I mean, it's just, and I just got a remastered version copy of this. So I have one that's not, and then I just got this one, and it sounds just a little bit more cleaned up. It's wicked. I love it. So my favorite Zeppelin album, one of my favorite albums of all times. So many, and you're right. Every song on it is like a massive. There's no skippable tunes on this. I think of that in 4 as well, but more so on Graffiti. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So that's your 10A, and then number 4 is 10B.
That's right. I like them very similar, but I mean, it's just Kashmir. You've got so much good stuff, and I mean, there's another one that the album cover is absolutely iconic. I think it's just so freaking amazing. I love it.
Yeah.
I just bought a T-shirt of that album cover recently.
Oh, cool.
Anyway, okay, Ken, what about your list?
Okay, so Jim, we're actually really, really close. What you've got is pretty much what I have. So like number 8, Into the Outdoor. Number 7 is Presence. Those are all right. There's a couple of songs that are really good, but I don't know. I'm not really a huge fan of it. Number 6, I'm putting Led Zeppelin 3. It's pretty solid. Number 5, I have Led Zeppelin 2. Number 4 is Led Zeppelin, the debut. Number 3 is Houses of the Holy, which is another album that I actually do like. I really like that album cover. That album cover is just, it's the bomb. It's the bomb. Number 2 is Zeppelin 4, which I think we've all agreed it's a pretty solid release. And I have to agree with you guys, basically, Physical Graffiti is their best album. It's a pure classic. Not much to say. All the songs are great. Nothing is skippable. It's a solid release.
Yes, and I was going to mention something. Oh, well, we'll see when Billy listens to our podcast, and hopefully he'll comment on YouTube. But I'm pretty sure I talked to Billy about Led Zeppelin, and Presence is his favorite Led Zeppelin album, I believe.
Really?
So we'll see if he comments there, because we all had it near the bottom of our lists. But I believe he told me that was his favorite one. So we'll see. So Billy, if you're listening, make sure you comment and tell us what's your number 1.
Yeah, we need to know.
And everybody else too. Everybody tell us your favorite Led Zeppelin album or your least favorite.
Absolutely.
Okay, so, and Ken, I think you wanted to talk a little about some of the offsprings of bands that people did from this band, especially Robert Plant and Jimmy Page, but you want to talk about some of those?
Yeah, I was just wanted to piggyback off what Jim had said earlier, that maybe it was the right thing to do for the band to call it quits after Bonham died. But then I got to thinking that, well, the music that they made afterwards, individually and as partially together, is pretty remarkable stuff, really, when you think about it. Look at Plant with as a solo artist. You've got Now and Zen, Manic Nirvana, Fate of Nations. All three of those albums are fucking great albums. They're really
Mhm.
solid. They're really solid albums. And then when the Page and Plant thing got together to do No Quarter and Walking into Clarksdale, again, both great. A lot of really good material on there for me. Um, but my favorite out of this bunch for me is gonna be Jimmy Page's Outrider, which is absolutely one of my favorite. His only solo record, Wasting My Time. What a song! I played that song over and over and over, and it's a fantastic album. So when you think about it, like, yeah, okay, they broke up, and it was probably the right thing to do. I mean, I get that their buddy died, and they're a family to some degree, but thinking about it on reflection, the amount of music that they've made afterwards is it's just remarkable. And Page to this day still makes music, and so does Plant. And Plant's voice is still great. I mean, even now with the stuff he's been doing in the last few years, it's still pretty good. I mean, he's still got a good range as a vocalist. So so to some degree, it's a blessing and a curse. The band quits, they're done, but the music that's come afterwards is fantastic. So yeah, I just kind of feel like there's a lot of really good stuff out there. If you're young and you're getting into Zeppelin and you want to hear the offshoot stuff, I'd say go for it because you won't go wrong with that either.
And what was that Jimmy Page album you said?
It's Outrider,
Oh, okay.
1988.
Because actually, I don't think I listened to too much of that, so I'll have to check that
I
out.
love that. I love that album. The album is one of my favorite albums. It's great, totally
And
great.
And I'm just looking on my phone on Spotify, but I can't find it. But I know Robert Plant did an album with, or not Robert Plant, Jimmy Page did an album with David Coverdale too. And I
That's
remember
right.
liking that, but I
Yeah.
can't find, and I'd have to look through all my CDs here to find it. I didn't do that
That's
before.
another good
Co-
album. That's a really good
Coverdale
album
and
too.
Page. Yeah.
Yes. I think, did they
Yeah.
make more than one or just one? I can't
I think they
remember.
made a couple.
Yeah.
There's a
But
couple records.
Coverdale's a great singer too. So,
Oh, absolutely.
and Jim, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Ken said, but even taking it like one step removed, you even have Jason Bonham, who had that, like in 1989, had that band Bonham,
Yeah.
where it was kind of more of a heavier, sort of a bit more of a pop metal band, but still was, it was pretty good. I think I have one of the albums, the first album. I can't remember what it's called, but I had that, and I remember, the big selling feature at the record store, and I think it did fairly well, was that it was, John Bonham's son. So kind of jumping on that, and I kind of went after that. But also, just kind of an interesting thing, Jason Bonham played the drummer in Steel Dragon for Mark Wahlberg's fictional band there in Rockstar. So he was
That's right.
actually the drummer in the sort of that loosely based Judas Priest sort of biography kind of thing that they did with Jennifer Aniston and Marky Wahlberg there. Kind of terrible, but hey, it's worth a watch.
Yeah. Oh, well, just to add on to what you're saying there, Jim. That Bonham album, The Disregard of Timekeeping, because I have that album too, the first album.
That's right. That's what it is.
1989. 1989.
Yeah.
And they still, and even though like this was years ago, of course, this is 71, that's whatever years ago, but you still have band like Greta Van Fleet. I don't know if you know that band, but they definitely are influenced by Led Zeppelin, and Wolf Mother from Australia definitely were influenced by Led Zeppelin. Sure. You still get it. And then there's the heavy metal band Trouble, who were doom metal. And of course, they were influenced by Black Sabbath. But then as they had their album Manic Frustration, which I really like, and I find that one is more Led Zeppelin-ish than Black Sabbath-ish. So even band can be influenced by two different pioneers of heavy metal there, because Trouble is one of my favorite bands, and that's probably why.
That's a great band.
Yeah. Can't go wrong.
Okay, so that was good. Anything to add about Led Zeppelin or anything else here?
No, they're one of the greatest bands, one of the greatest rock and blues bands. One of the three pillars, and as we stated earlier, Sabbath, Purple, and Zeppelin. Those three pretty much started all, in my opinion. So,
and I was just looking up stuff, Black Sabbath versus Led Zeppelin. I know we're all going to say that or everybody's mostly going to say Black Sabbath started heavy metal with their first album, fine. But I like Led Zeppelin better than Black Sabbath, and I like Deep Purple better than Black Sabbath too. The old stuff, anyway.
Blake,
But
what do you think of the first Purple album, the very first one they did, like in '67? Do you like that one?
the first Deep
Where
Purple
like,
album,
yeah,
I'd
the
have to,
first, they're very trippy. Like, why did Rosemary's Baby take the pill? Remember that song? That's a really weird song.
yeah, I don't suppose the first Deep Purple album was very heavy, was it then? Right?
No, it was trippy. It was very, very psychedelic.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and listen to it again. For me, Deep Purple kind of started with
In rock, probably.
yeah, in
In
rock.
rock,
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
gonna say
yeah.
in
Same with
rock,
me.
and then
Yeah.
that's
especially
right.
Machine Head or whatever
And
too.
Machine Head, yeah.
Fireball.
That's really when I got
Fireball,
into
yeah. That's a
Deep
good
Purple
one.
there. Because I did go back to some of those other albums and went through them probably for that podcast we did. But yeah, it wasn't until they got really heavier that
Hmm.
I really got into them. Yes. So yeah, we know the Black Sabbath kind of started it, but these other bands are obviously important to influence different bands all along and everything.
Yeah.
But I was researching Black Sabbath versus Led Zeppelin, and there's people saying, oh, Black Sabbath is better this, better that. But it's all just your own opinion, just like you said about the
Sure.
guy who thought they sucked live or whatever.
Yeah,
But it's just your opinion on what you like the best. Like, I like Led
absolutely.
Zeppelin the best, but I'm not going to say, okay, Led Zeppelin started heavy metal just because I like them better. I'm just going to say
Yeah.
they're just as important. They just weren't really metal, I guess. I mean, well, Black Sabbath weren't metal either because they had to kind of make the name. Even the first, I was reading that where the first Black Sabbath album isn't really that metal compared to some of their other stuff later because they were just making their own sound too, right? And
Yeah.
discovering what they wanted to be.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
anyway, that was a good podcast. Thanks, guys, for doing this. I wanted to make sure we did a Led Zeppelin one sometime, and I guess we could have
Cool.
did the one that we all liked, number one, but we still like this a close second. So, and
Sure.
this is their biggest selling album, this one. So I thought it was kind of fitting, and so we could all talk about Stairway to Heaven and Satan
Oh
backwards.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for joining me. I don't know what episode we're doing next, so make sure you tune in again next week. Thanks everybody for listening. Goodbye.